Welcome to We Are Everyone, a video and podcast series powered by Pivotal Moments, and we focus on the intersection of mental wellness in the workforce. We bring together young professionals and mindful executive mentors to bridge the generational gap and bring to the surface conversations about the importance of mental wellness and how to overcome career tradition challenges. Mental wellness is paramount. Join us. Welcome to We Are Everyone / Mental Recess. I am your host, Jenn Sherman, and we have a very special guest today. Actually, I think we've been really wanting to get students on the show, honestly, because I think you guys are obviously the future. But I think this is our first student. We have Elizabeth Burns. She is a rising senior at TCU, which is Texas Christian University. She also is a host of her own podcast with a co-host of yours called Bubble Wrapped, which I kind of love.
Bubble Wrapped.
Yeah,
yes.
Bubble Wrapped, which I think is really creative. But welcome, Elizabeth. How are you today? Can you just kind of start with telling the audience a little bit about yourself? You know, what do you like to do? You know, what's your pastime? What's your favorite subject in school? All that jazz.
Yes, thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here and talk with you. So as you mentioned, I'm going to be a rising senior at Texas Christian University, also commonly known as TCU. It's located in Fort Worth, Texas, which is about like 45 minutes away from Dallas. And I'm also a business minor. So I'm kind of just like in the process right now of figuring out what I want to do. I grew up in St. Louis, Missouri, and which kind of comes from the name Bubble Wrapped, because if you know St. Louis or if you're from St. Louis, you kind of know that you grow up in a bubble and you're kind of stick to what you know and the people you know and the things around you. And so we kind of came up with the idea of having a podcast where we kind of talk about what it's like living in that bubble and then also going to college and having new experiences outside of that bubble. And in my free time, I love hanging out with my family and my friends. I love to write. That's like my favorite way to decompress, kind of let everything out. I love music. I just like things that make me, but I just like to do things that make me happy and aid to my whole, which we'll talk more on the podcast. That's the other thing.
Actually,
my friend and I,
we could call it the pod. I like that. Like,
yeah. And I, who is my co-host, we call it the pod. So
we can totally call it the pod. I love that.
We'll talk about that more, but I'm kind of now in a place in my life where everything I do, I try to have it aid in my mental fitness journey. And I've kind of set up boundaries and cut out things that aren't going to aid me in that. So yeah, I'm kind of just on this journey of figuring out what's going to be good for me and how to become the strongest as I head into my career.
Well, I mean, one thing I will say is that I just learned about boundaries last year and I'm 30. So you're ahead of the game. I think if I learned about boundaries at an earlier age, I would have been I think I just would have been more strong mentally fit. I think mentally fit strong. I don't know it's a Friday. So my brain's like not totally putting all the words together, but no, I love that. I mean, here's the thing. I think like being able to kind of set yourself up for success, have this time, be really kind of in tune with yourself is important. And I find it interesting, we were in our initial conversation, you told me about how you're a journalism major and how you're a journalism major and also a business minor. And I just find it interesting, what led you to decide, you said you liked writing, but what led you to decide to study journalism?
Sure. So actually it all started in high school. My junior year of high school, my AP English teacher, her name was Mrs. Key, and I totally credit her for she completely changed my writing and pushed me in ways and helped me to think in ways that I didn't even know I was capable of. And through that, I just really developed my writing and fell in love with writing, joined my high school newspaper. And through that, I just started to kind of get some stories published with like the gym I was going to. And then I wrote a story for my high school's open house about like advice for freshmen coming in. And I just kind of started to notice that my stories were connecting with people and people were enjoying them. And so through that, I realized that that's a talent that I could pursue, and it was one of my strengths. And the other thing is as I was deciding what I wanted to do, I knew I wanted to do something that I was going to love and that I was going to be happy doing. You know, I never really wanted to take the safe route or choose the safe major, because I never thought that would be like fulfilling to me. It never really interested me. And so once I became passionate about journalism, I realized that that was something I thought would be fun for me for the rest of my life, which was really important to me.
No, I love that. And I think writing is such a important. Sorry, I'm looking at a wasp outside and I'm so happy I closed my door, or I would be having a mid-interview freak out. Anyways, but I think that was my distraction. But I think the aspect of writing is something that a lot of folks like don't really have these days. I think writing and the importance of reading and the importance of like cursive. I mean, I don't even know if people teach cursive in school anymore, or teachers, but people are just, everything is like everything's like headlines now. And so like the power of the word and the fact that you are able to capture such an audience, you know, with just that, like that's a very powerful tool. So, you know, one aspect where now I'm not the center of attention. Millennials are like not the center of attention anymore. It's the Gen Zers. Welcome to the club. And I'm just curious, like being a part of the Gen Z generation. And frankly, I was just talking to our CEO, Bob Morgan, about this yesterday, about how we, you know, the idea of generations, and like, I think we just kind of like in the stereotypes is like, we just need to smash the generational stereotypes. So I'm just kind of curious, like as a part of Gen Z, how do you think your idea and approach to journalism and media differs from previous generations?
Well, I think that first of all, the media and social media is completely different than any other generation that has been through. When I look at my parents' generation and I learn about journalism during their time, it's like, you know, your parents would be subscribed to a newspaper, it would show up on your front door, and that was your news for the day. That was your story for the day. You couldn't go on the interweb and search a million different topics or a million different ways people were thinking about those topics. And now it's, you know, people can get their news anywhere they want. There's not just thousands, but probably millions of news publications to, just like you said, there's so much of news reporting now, and so much of learning is how to like get that headline, how to capture people, how to get people to click on your story, because there's so much news out there. And so I think it's just honestly trying to balance that out. The other thing is anyone can be a journalism these days. Everyone has a phone. You know, if you capture a video, if you capture a photo, you have the, you know, if it's big enough, you have the chance to start a movement. You have a cultural shift. Like we've seen that so many times. And so it's now like journalists aren't just competing with the next news organization down the street. You know, everyone can be a journalist. So I think that as Gen Zers grow up and start to enter the field, I hope that there's this shift towards authenticity. Because I think with how much news is out there and available to us, it can feel so disconnected and so objective. And so I think that as we move more into it, you just have to be authentic and report the story as objective as you can, because we're really straying from that right now. And with how much there's available to us, I think that's probably the best way to capture an audience right now.
Yeah, but so question though for you is like, okay, so you're becoming your journalism major, right? And but if you're saying everyone can like I think there's the aspect of like the aspect of what's too much information where, you know, everyone can't, they have a phone, right? And they can literally tweet or put on Facebook or put on Instagram like their thoughts, and that's like people could take that, and if it's a trusted resource like a friend or something, you're like, oh well, my friend said this. It's like, I guess my question though is everyone can be a journalist, but how can we kind of bring authenticity and authority back to the media as well, whereas like let's stay in our lane, just because it's kind of like doctors, right? Just because I have WebMD, which is not a healthy rabbit hole to go towards. But I'll tell you, I think during the pandemic, I literally I thought of myself like I'm a doctor. Like not a doctor, but I know enough to like tell you. And that is not my job. Like I'm not a doctor. I did not go to medical school. You are studying journalism. And so my question is like, what does that kind of look like? Like, what does the future of journalism look like? And then, kind of segueing that into like one of the topics that is very spoken about these days, but it's spoken about in a sense, but there's not really a lot of solutions. It's just like, okay, mental health is a pandemic now. But my question is like going back to what's the future of journalism, but then what's the future of like journalism in the sense of mental health too? Because like, again, journalists are not psychologists. So I'm just kind of curious, like why, like what have you kind of seen and how do you think the conversation of mental health is changing? How do you see like journalism and all that? Like, I'm just kind of curious. I know there's a lot of kind of topics, questions, but I think it all folds up into the same big picture here. So wanted to get your thoughts.
I think the future of journalism is, and the way we're taught in the kind of scary part is it's completely unpredictable. We have no idea what it's going to look like in 10 years. I think if you would have asked a journalist 30 years ago if newspapers would ever become extinct, they probably would be like, no, absolutely not. And now it's being taught to us that we probably aren't going to have newspapers in 10 years. But I think moving forward with that, I think it's just really important that journalists kind of establish their own brand almost and have their own criteria, because it's now so much more than just the story you're publishing. Because like you said, not everyone is a journalist and not everyone has those credentials or studied for it. But again, there's just so many different places for someone to go to their news. Someone can start a blog and start writing news and portray that. But I think that when a journalist moving forward is writing for a corporation, I think it's also important for them to have their own voice in a sense, and kind of make a relationship with their audience and be more personable and be more authentic. And I think filtering that with mental health, I think just again, being honest, having those real conversations, trying to connect with your audience in a way. Because I think you can either read a story and just skim it, take a few viewpoints from it, or you can read a story, feel moved, want to share it, learn from it. And I think that's when a story becomes influential, is when you learn with it. And even if you don't struggle with mental health, if you know someone who struggles with mental health and you are reading a story that has to do with it, I think if you can take just one thing away from it, then I think that's how journalists will become more successful in the future, is just being personable and having their audiences able to connect with them instead of just being this distant voice or just like an author on a page. So I think moving forward, that's what I'm going to try to facilitate in my career.
And also I think it's like making it more like rather than shunning out, I just think that we have these big corporations where it's like, or big media, it's like, it's too large. I potentially see it, maybe reporting and journalism goes more micro. So for example, like, let's just say you have like the pod, right? Like the pod is like, if that's where you're going to get your news, is you love this journalist and this is where you get your news, and your agreement with them, they're personable, you have like that. And that doesn't mean, I just think right now that we're so consumed by like maybe one or two voices or opinions that saying it's the end all be all, that it's like, that's the problem versus the individual, personable, authentic. It's like, just because X person goes this way or believes in this doesn't mean that Y person is wrong. It means that's what X person likes. Then follow your X person and build that relationship. But it's not, there's no right or wrong, versus now it's so drastic and it's so like clickbait and stuff that I just think it's detrimental on mental health, because people will take an organization, and it's like, and I also think perspective and experience plays into it, because it's kind of like, people come from so many, and we talk about this, we are everyone, we all come from so many different walks of life, that it's like, you can't, just because if there's only one or couple, maybe there's 5 news sources, that are the credible ones, or we call them credible, and it's like not, I can't relate to it. That's hard. So I just think that's interesting. So I'm kind of curious, something we talk about at Pivotal Moments is mental fitness and kind of being aware of the importance of mental strength. I'm kind of curious of how you define the term mental fitness.
I describe mental fitness as, well, my definition of mental fitness has definitely changed over the year. Like my definition now is completely different than it was a year ago. But I would say now my definition of mental fitness is kind of when my thoughts, ideas, and my actions all align and they all are strong. The other thing of my mental fitness is when I'm super aware. I wake up every morning with the things I know I need to do to start my day, to be centered, to have like my brain on the right foot. I know the actions that, identifying during the day when I'm not feeling so good or things are making me feel a certain way. And instead of, being negative or associating a feeling with that, just being aware and taking the time to take a few deep breaths and recenter myself. So I would say, I think it has a lot to do with being aware, being conscious of my feelings and the way I want to react to things, but also surrounding myself in environments that provide me that space to be the person I want to be and achieve the goals I want to achieve. And so I think it's just all connected for me, mainly of surrounding myself with people that make me feel good and help me achieve what I want to achieve. And then also doing my own time of my own personal work, whether that's reading, writing, meditating, journaling, all of the above. And I think as I, progress on my mental health journey and I start to experience new things and enter new phases of my life, it's going to continue to change. And that's the other thing. I've learned to not get so stuck to a plan or not be so stuck on this is what's going to happen, this is what I need to do, but allowing things to come into my space when they want to come and letting them go when they want to go. So I think just like being more connected with myself, and that's like the main thing, just being so connected with myself and knowing what I want and, living my life each day and choosing to do that.
Yeah. I mean, I think alignment's a really big one that I don't think I took notes here so I could send it to, so I could alignment, because I think alignment is where a lot of us get caught up if we're not, is that's like the different voices that are just kind of like literally just noise and distracting each other. And I just think having the alignment of all like your senses is really important. And then, if there is a voice in there, like, all right, you know what, move over. Like, we're not playing this game today. Okay. Like, we're not playing it.
Right.
Because I mean, you'll always have that. Like, again, maybe I'm the crazy one where there is a time and space where you wake up and there's complete Zen. I think that but I haven't gotten there yet, but potentially,
no, I completely agree.
Yeah, I think it's a matter
it's never perfect.
Yeah. Like, I think it's a matter of, which I've learned, is to understand how to quiet the voices that are getting out of alignment,
right?
And kind of going with that overall. So I'm curious, like, how do you think this idea of mental fitness can tie into the larger dialogue around mental health? And then also, like, I think she just recently graduated, but Soroya Tinker, who was on the podcast, she was at Yale, and she played professional hockey for the team. And I'm just curious, like, there's just so, I don't know if this is, I can't speak for everyone Gen Z, because again, like, everyone has individual, but I do think that Gen Z are learning more about these things of boundaries and perspective that I didn't learn until I was older. So I'm just curious how all this kind of plays into a larger dialogue and then also communication.
Yeah, I think that, again, as you were saying, we're aware of so much and we're exposed to so much information. It's just more of like, there's so many podcasts now on like mental fitness, and now like people's favorite influencers are
expressing mental fitness. And I think, again, it's like, it feel like you kind of were saying earlier, it can feel so disconnected, and it can feel so like someone's just saying something to you or going through the motions. And I think as we tie in mental fitness into journalism, again, I think it's just like the authenticity and being able to be personable and connect with an audience and, you know, be authentic about it, because I still think there's so much push in college of like, these are the best 4 years of your life and you're having so much fun and you're going to meet so many friends and you're going to do all these things, and you do all those things and it is really fun. But there's also a lot of, you know, other struggles you go through that aren't as talked about, even still, even with how much awareness mental health is getting, especially post the pandemic. But I still think there's a lot of growth and room to express the real like life struggles of mental health in college students, and that it's not perfect and like you're going to feel alone at some points. But I think just being able to be that person that someone feels that they can read your stories and like have that person and not feel so alone, and know that it is like okay to feel this way during the best 4 years of your life. I think just kind of tying that into, I think just tying that into journalistic work is really important, because as when someone feels alone, you just get so tied in your own thoughts, and that leads to so much self, you know, degrading, and, you know, you don't feel your best. And so I think it's just really important for people to, you know, hit all sides of the story, and not just the other thing with mental fitness in journalism. I feel like you get a lot of the same story over and over again. And it's like, especially if you're informed on the topic. And so I feel like digging deeper and like going deeper into other issues, or like how you might feel in this certain situation, and just kind of laying that all out there and being honest and being vulnerable, I also think is really important for young journalists.
Yeah, I mean, I think to your point of like going to your source, I mean, also there's authenticity versus like with social impact was a trend. Everyone was slapping social impact as they were saying they were a social impact company where they weren't. It's ingrained in the mission of the company. And I think now, like, I hope, and we kind of are seeing this shift from like the macro to the micro, where it's like you just pick your person and you pick maybe one or two people. Cause it's like you could have 10 people in a row talking about mental health, and only one of them is actually authentic. And like the rest of them, like it's like, and it's like they're just talking about it because it's a buzzword. Where like for someone who's struggled with anxiety my whole life, like it's not cute. Like to like throwing around anxiety 100%. Is like not like, do you know, like it's like, do you actually know what anxiety feels like? And I hope you don't, you know, but like don't,
I relate with you so hard on
like
that.
don't like, it's kind of those things like, I hope you don't know what it feels like inside, but it's like now it's like everyone's kind of throwing it around. And I just think that we need to get more like not just following the masses, and it's just exhausting. But you know, at the end of the day, Liz, I don't think that that's going to change, right? I think people are people, and I think it's like that's what we love at Pivotal Moments Media is like you can watch our content, you love it, but like if you don't, then it's fine. Like we're not trying to meet the 300 million or 6 billion people in the world. We're trying to meet the people who align with our content and they want to watch our content, and they have the same values as the organization. So I think that's just like an interesting standpoint and aspect of what the future looks like. Yeah, exactly.
I really relate with that. Something for me that's become really just like frustrating for me. It's like sometimes it feels like, oh, like this new person, it just feels so repetitive of like, was this a PR move to have like this mental health issue? Like, did you need a little, you know what I'm saying? And like, I never want to take that away from anyone, but it does feel so artificial sometimes. And I think it makes like kind of a joke and leads even more stigma to people not wanting to like share their mental illness or like what they're going through, because it becomes such a buzzword, and it's like, actually, it's not cool at all. And anyone that struggles with it knows it's not cool, and like wouldn't wish it upon anyone.
Right.
Because and so I think with that, it's like, that's kind of my main thing that really made me want to, pursue mental health in my career, because that is such a real frustration, and not being able to connect with people and feeling alone. I just hope I can be that journalist that's like, okay, this isn't cool, but like, kind of like you touched earlier, it's like, honestly, I do believe mental health, it doesn't just go away. It's not like a poof, there's going to be obstacles every single day of your life. You're going to wake up some days and feel good, and you're going to wake up other days and it's going to be really rough. But being able to know what you can do to still live your life happily, because you still can, like, it's always going to be there, but there's so many ways to work through it. And so I think that it's like, if you really want to connect with your audience, then I think you can provide that space for them. And just I feel like when you even talk to someone, you can tell like, oh, like you can connect with someone that's gone through mental illness, because you can tell when someone's just trying to get the buzzword and when someone's just
actually authentic,
really,
or authentic. And I just think that I've done at least a lot of, cutting cords and energy that just doesn't serve me, and it's like, those are the types of things where like it's energetically, we're not all supposed to fit together. We all have different energies, and that's okay. But people, I think, protecting your own light throughout your journey is like the most important thing. And I think, looking at that, and looking at that from mental health perspective, I think it's just going to be really interesting to see how, and I'm excited. I'm someone who, like, I love to embrace all generations. It's like how I think that we're all learning from each other, and it's not a matter of who knows more or whatever. I mean, theoretically, of course, if you're on Earth longer, you might probably know, but like, it's ridiculous. So that's the mood I'm in today. I'm feeling a little sassy. But I love that. So Elizabeth, because we could talk for another hour, but I know that our audiences now, people have shorter time periods, with the TikToks of the world and stuff. But I'm curious, is there anything you wanted to kind of leave with the audience before we wrapped up today?
I think just to kind of touch back on, like, with everything being super overexposed on social media, I think, kind of like we talked about today, it's like, I think people hit a certain point in social media where it's just like you said, you kind of just cut off what doesn't make you feel good. You unfollow the people that aren't providing you content that's, necessarily making you feel good or informing you things on that you want to know. And so, kind of to relate back to how can journalists, provide positive mental health content, it's just like, again, being that outlet, being that source where they feel comfortable and they feel like they can relate to you. And like, you're not just another journalist trying to get clickbait or like have the most clicks at the end of the year for your company. It's, being able to really be there for your audience and want to deliver the news. And, I don't ever want to be the type of journalist that tells you what to think or implies in a story of, this is my point of view. I think it's really important to be objective, and then from that, allow people to, make their own decisions and make their own opinions on the matter. And I think that's another way that we can really help people with mental health issues, is providing dialogue and providing information, but then allowing them to go out and share their own opinions and their own, thoughts on the idea. And I think that would provide a much happier and healthier space in journalism, rather than everyone just screaming at each other and telling them what's right and what's wrong, and that you're an awful person if you don't believe this.
I mean, it's just ridiculous. I don't understand why people can't, like, didn't we learn not to do that in like elementary school?
I know.
I mean, I love our teachers. Like, thank you for your service, but I'm just curious, and that made parents. I just don't understand why people don't grow up, but that's a whole other conversation. Well, I just want to say thank you so much, Elizabeth. I know that you might be helping out a little bit this summer at Pivotal Moments Media, so we're really excited to have you. And this has been an awesome conversation, and thank you so much for coming on. Maybe we'll have a next episode with Meredith, your co-host, and do a little,
Yes.
bubble wrap meets
That'd be
mental
so
recess.
fun.
That would be kind of fun. I love that. All right. Well, thank you to our audience so much for always tuning in to another episode of Mental Recess. I'm your host, Jen Sherman, and we will catch you next time. Thank you for tuning into another episode of We Are Everyone. You can subscribe to We Are Everyone on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, and also be sure to visit www.pivotalmoments.org to learn more about the organization. And we also want to hear what mental wellness means to you. So you can follow us on social media, submit your video, and we will catch you next time. Thank you so much.